All right, man. We got Chris Moody for you. You got till 10:18.
Excellent.
And I'm from Boone, North Carolina, so I'm just up the mountain from y'all.
Are you really? Oh my God, dude. That's awesome.
So I'm at Appalachian State. So.
Oh my God. So you're kind of chilly up there because it's 48 right now here in Charlotte. So my God.
Yeah, we always have about 10, 20 degrees lower than you guys have. Yeah.
Oh my God. Chris, how did you get mixed in with this story?
A couple of years ago, Matt Drudge made a conscious decision to disappear from public life. He had this website that had broken so many big major news stories, and he appeared publicly on TV shows, radio shows, and he decided that he was going to back away and just speak directly through his website called the Drudge Report. And we wanted to know why he decided to do that, where he went, and try to find what happened to Matt Drudge.
Will you lead us on in a way of that he could have built a compound somewhere in Florida?
Well, he has homes all over the country, if not the world. He certainly likes to travel and live in different places, including Florida, Arizona, Israel. He spends a lot of time in Las Vegas. He's like Carmen Sandiego. He likes to be on the move and not have anyone know where he is. But yeah, he used to live near Miami Beach in the city. He liked city life, really enjoyed it. And he decided about 10 or so years ago to buy this compound way out near the Everglades. Several acres where you couldn't really find him very easily. Even on Google Maps, you couldn't see his house from above. And so actually we were going to head over there and try to speak with him, but he put the house for sale while we were working on this story. So we ended up speaking with a veteran reporter from South Florida who did visit his house, knocked on the door for a story he was working for. And let me tell you, Matt Drudge was not thrilled that he got this visit. He called him screaming and yelling, claiming he was going to call the police, saying you were very brave to do that. You know, bad things could happen for trespassers and that kind of thing, He's a person who really wants his privacy and is really important to him to have it. And so but he's also a public figure. He's somebody who has a major impact on the news environment, the digital media environment we live in today. And that's what led us to want to speak with him, to understand him. He's somebody that has shaped the world we're living in. And we're very curious to hear his thoughts on the state of media and politics today.
I'm glad you brought that word shaped in there. And the reason being is because I was with a representative of CNN a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about how news and journalism has changed so much. And he told me it's because those that were journalists during the day of the internet coming in, that they basically started believing in every story that was up on the internet. And I can't help but wonder if Matt Drudge wasn't part of this, to where it's like, well, if Matt said it, it must be true.
So reporters, left, right, and center, all over the political spectrum, read the Drudge Report.
Yes,
they had it as their homepage, and I'm one of them as a reporter coming of age in the 2000s, refreshing that site on a regular basis. I spoke with members of the media team for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, and they couldn't count the number of times reporters would call them saying, hey, I saw a story that just came across the wire, which meant the Drudge Report.
Yep.
And they would ask for response from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And this drove Hillary Clinton's campaign crazy. They just were so tired of having to respond to reports from the Drudge Report. The thing about Drudge, though, is he was largely unreachable. So if you're a member of a presidential campaign and someone writes something you don't like, you can call their editor, get him on the phone, and give him an earful, right? But you couldn't do that for Matt Drudge. You couldn't call him no matter what. But what's very interesting, though, is Hillary Clinton's campaign did have a back channel relationship with Drudge through a young staffer who developed what I think we might be able to call a friendship between the two of them, and was able to plant stories. But every campaign had this. Media outlets had people that had back channels to Drudge. Bush's campaign, Bush's White House had people that spoke with him. He was somebody who was involved all over the map and had that influence in Washington that really was unmatched.
It's really interesting that Hillary Clinton had that relationship with him when this was the guy who broke the story with Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky.
It is fascinating how politics can create these strange bedfellows. But, Drudge really felt as though the Clintons always had an eye on him. He was kind of conspiratorial about that. He told a former editor that he liked to leave the country during election seasons, just in case something bad might happen to him, Wow. But yeah, it was fascinating that one of his best relationships in politics was with a Hillary Clinton staffer named Tracy Seffel, who spoke with him pretty constantly for a very, very long time. And then, like many relationships that Drudge had, just kind of fell off the face of the earth, and they haven't spoken in a very long time. That's kind of how he liked to operate. He was somebody who was in your life and then gone the next day, and you could never know when your email or phone calls would just stop being returned. That's something that he did to individuals, and it's something he did to everybody in a way, which is what really launched this podcast, Finding Matt Drudge.
Wow, that guy was ghosting people before it became cool.
He certainly was. He seemed to have no qualms about it. He has a small circle of friends that includes the conservative pundit Ann Coulter, who I spoke to, but she declined to be a part of the podcast. But she's somebody that has kept up with him. He was also close with people like Rush Limbaugh. He would go to Rush Limbaugh's parties in Palm Beach, Florida. Yep. And he maintained a circle of people, but it was very small, very tight. A lot of people I spoke to for the show said, oh, yeah, I met him once 20 years ago, and they had just this little meeting, and then poof, he was gone. But he's the kind of guy you run into in an elevator, and then you never forget it 20 years later. There's very few people like that can leave that kind of lasting impression.
So we've got to go all the way back to the beginning, because things don't just suddenly appear. Who is this guy? How did he even begin?
Matt Drudge was a nobody. He was not college educated. He was working at the gift shop at CBS Studios in Los Angeles in the 1990s. But he always had an ear for news. He always had, he'd make a great editor of like the New York Post or something like that, even though he never went to journalism school or studied anything like that. But when he was at the gift shop, he started going through the trash, and he found that people in CBS Studios would take ratings from hit TV shows and throw them in the garbage before they made public. And he grabbed those suckers and put them on the internet and started scooping people on entertainment news. And after you have a couple of scoops, then sources find you and say, hey, you know what else you should report? And so he really had a newsletter in the 90s, very early on, that would deliver scoops like this about entertainment. And then with his connections back in Washington, where he grew up in the shadow of the elite media, the Washington Post, he started to develop relationships with people in D.C. and that started to give him information about politics. And that's where I think he got on America's big radar, breaking the news about Monica Lewinsky's relationship with President Bill Clinton in a way that legacy media outlets were scared to do. He really pushed the news industry into the digital media era that we know today by posting news and updates faster than the Washington Post or Newsweek could at the time, and everybody had to rush to compete. Now, this didn't make him friends in the news media. He actually was a bit of a pariah because he didn't play by the rules. He's somebody that did march to the beat of his own drum, that did not have the academic pedigree that many elite news people have. He gave a famous speech at the National Press Club. This is the clubhouse for elite news reporters. I used to be a member in Washington, D.C. And he kind of rubbed their noses in it and said, everything's changing and you better get on board. And he was right. And if you watch that video, the questions that reporters asked were actively hostile. You could sense the anger, the steam coming out of people's ears in the room. And he just kept doing his thing. He always remained independent, never sold the website to a big news organization. And I think he was successful directly because of that insistence on his independence.
God, his story is so inspiring for having that courage, because he got to do things that a lot of us dream of doing, and people tried to get in his way, but he still kept pushing himself. But at the same time, I still understand the journalists that are going, God, would this guy just shut up? Come on, we got to get our own thing in here.
Well, he was not only scooping them, but he had a lot of things right, but didn't always. There were things that he would get wrong sometimes. And he didn't necessarily have the corrections channels that a lot of news organizations have. He didn't have that backstop of fact checking. I spoke with people who would send him scoops and say, hey, look, I don't know this for sure to be true, but I've heard this. Be sure to check it out. Please don't post it with just based on what I say. And then they check the Drudge Report and boof, there it is, what they said posted right there. And it was turned out to be wrong, so that would happen. And that frustrated a lot of journalists. At the same time, journalists were always checking it because he had stuff they did not have and they didn't want to be left in the dust. And so they always had to at least try to catch up or match it. And I think when people are following you like that, they can't hate you too much because they have to compete with you and you're beating them.
Here's the part that I don't understand for being a broadcaster for 44 years, and that is, how can Matt Drudge just suddenly turn it off? Because, you know how we are, Chris. We dig and we dig and we dig. We live for that digging. How does Matt just walk away?
Well, he walked away from part of it. He was nationally exposed, being featured in glossy big news magazine profiles that really dug into his personal life, which I think affected him pretty deeply. He didn't like that very much. And his decision to walk away was not to walk away from the game of news and information. The Drudge Report continues to be updated to this day, continues to have dynamic, interesting content. But what you won't see is him participating in interviews. You won't see him photographed. I believe the last time we've seen his face nationally was when he attended a presidential primary debate in 2015, and he appeared on in the audience. CNN camera got his face, which is a very rare thing indeed. But he's somebody who refuses to be photographed. I spoke with his editor, who worked for him for 4 years, and on their parting lunch before before the editor left the Drudge Report, he said, "Hey, let's get a photo together. I've known you for a long time." And Drudge said, "Absolutely not." Wow. He's a no selfie guy. When he appeared on the Alex Jones show as a guest, he refused to allow him to videotape his face, instead being just a silhouette on screen. And so this is just part of the allure of the game. I think he likes to speak just through that website and not have to deal with being a public person. It's almost like a Batman kind of approach. He doesn't want you to know much about him. He wants to do his own thing. But if he has something to say, he'll say it through the Drudge Report. Yeah,
but you know what, though? You bring up a good point on the podcast. Is he even in control of it anymore? Who is in control?
Matt Drudge is in control.
Wow.
We raised the question because so many people were wondering, especially when he turned against Donald Trump in 2020. People thought, who is this? This couldn't be the Matt Drudge we've always known. I think that was based on a misconception of him because he was breaking news that were hurting the Clintons and hurting Obama for a long time. And because he does have some conservative policy views, people thought of him as one of their team. Well, he is not a team member. He is an individualist in many ways. And so he turning on Trump, people said it just can't be him anymore. But I spoke with a person who wrote a biography of Matt Drudge. His name's Matt Leshak. He wrote a book called Drudge Revolution. And he said he can confirm with absolute certainty that Drudge has not sold the website, that he has been offered what he described as ungodly sums of money and refused to sell. I also spoke with Larry O'Connor, who knew Drudge off and on and met him in 2012, speaking with him. And Drudge told him, he said, you know what, when I'm gone, when I retire or when I, gone from this earth, there will be no more Drudge Report. I will never let anybody run a site with my name on it without me being a part of it.
Yeah.
And I believe him. I think that's telling. And for those that say he doesn't run it anymore, we need to see some better evidence because I haven't seen, other than your hurt feelings about Trump, there's not much evidence there.
Yeah. Okay, here's the thing about Matt Drudge. First of all, in radio, I swear that we got rid of the AP and the Associated Press because everything was Matt Drudge, Matt Drudge, Matt Drudge. He had to have known he had that kind of power over people because everybody they were always running to him for those news stories. But when we dropped the AP, I was like, what? And we couldn't have been the only ones that did that.
He knew it and he loved it.
Yeah.
He loved to know that he could dictate the national conversation. Remember, he comes from a place where he is somebody that is shut out from the elite newsrooms of the world. He's just doesn't have the same kind of class education status. And so he's always has this kind of chip on his shoulder outsider mentality. And he was able to wield control of American power just through his website. And I'll tell you a story. He would love to speak with Rush Limbaugh before he'd go on air about the day's show. And then he would turn on Limbaugh and take great joy in hearing Limbaugh read directly from the Drudge Report. And then that came from someone that worked for him, that he would watch to see what people were saying about him, reading his site. He loved seeing it on the mainstream news as well. And like I said, with reporters that would call the Hillary Clinton campaign, if you're out on the campaign bus, you would go and sit in the back and look over the shoulders of all these reporters, and all their screens would be on the Drudge Report. And we're not talking about conservative media. I mentioned Rush Limbaugh, but we're talking about CNN, NBC, all the mainstream news sites. We're checking that out. Now, social media has kind of changed that. Nowadays, it's going to be Twitter, right? X. It's going to be a social media site because they're able to deliver information faster than Drudge could in 2024. But people are still checking it. I still check it because it's not run by an algorithm. And so much of our media life is. It's run by a living, breathing human being with curious, enigmatic tastes. And that's fun and it's unpredictable. And I would love to read something run by a person and try to get away from these robots telling me what they think I'll like. And that's certainly what draws me to the Drudge Report today.
In listening to your podcast, Finding Matt Drudge, the one thing that always keeps coming back to me is he's a man of mystique. And when I talk about people being of great mystery, it always reminds me of Led Zeppelin. That's the only reason why they became that great band that they did, is because they were a mystery. Matt Drudge is no different, and he's living that out right now. He's a mystery right now.
Well, it's mystery combined with talent. I would argue that the Lick and Whole Lot of Love, really with Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, made Led Zeppelin great because they were making amazing music. But the mystery does help. Certainly. It keeps people wondering and curious about a person like him. But, you can be a mystery, but if you never break a news story and you never do anything interesting, who cares? People care because of that combination, that 1-2 punch of somebody that maybe used to be a huge part in their life. And you're wondering, whatever happened to that guy? What changed? And that's what we wanted to get at in Finding Matt Drudge, to understand not just where is he today, but where was he before? Who was he? Because he's been a mystery and enigmatic even before he decided to disappear. When he would show up at a party in Washington, he was the main event. People would be so excited. If a host knew that Matt Drudge was coming to their party, they would shuttle him around and show him off like a prize dog. Like, look who's at my party. And he was known to be invited places and never show up. You just never knew, which is why in the podcast, my producer and I invite him to dinner in Las Vegas. And you'll have to listen to the final episode. And we invite him. We keep a chair open, just as you keep a chair open for Elijah on Passover, he's somebody that could very well just show up at any time. That is how he operates.
So you really want to talk with him then? Because I guess I have a list of people that I don't want to talk with. And the reason why is because it's always like, what are you going to say that I don't already know? Because I've done so much research. But you really want to talk with him, don't you?
Well, there's so many questions. Where have you been? Why did you leave? Why did you turn on Donald Trump? Are you happy with the way things turned out? Is this what you had hoped for when you launched the Drudge Report? Has your success been what you wanted it to be?
Yeah.
And where do you think the country is today in 2024? You're somebody that continues to drive media and politics. Where are we headed? What's the next step? How do you feel about the news media today? I think I know what he would say, but he does always surprise. And for somebody that just hasn't done an interview really, 2017, he appeared briefly on a radio show, and he did one interview with Alex Jones about 10 years ago or so. But that's it. The rest is just links on a website and maybe some things on Twitter here and there. And so for him to sit down to a big interview would be a major, major coup. And that's why we want to speak with Matt Drudge.
Is that one of the reasons why you set up the special hotline, just in case somebody has seen him?
We wanted to make it easy for people to contact us, and tell us stories. Have you seen him? Do you know where we could find him? It's like, oh, I just saw him at the grocery store in Arizona. Well, we'd hop on a plane and get out there, but also people just had stories from the past 25 years. We have a huge Rolodex as longtime political reporters in Washington. So, if you watch the podcast, or excuse me, if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear voices from the far right wing, Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, to Hillary Clinton campaign operatives, and liberal TV show hosts. And he operated in circles that were not merely partisan. And, today there's a lot of podcasts you can hear from one side. You're going to hear from a lot of sides in Finding Matt Drudge.
I love it, dude. You got to come back to this show anytime in the future. And you being up there in Boone, man, we have to sit down and have a face-to-face sometime.
I'd love to do it, especially when it gets chilly up in Boone. I'll come down and warm up in Charlotte.
You be brilliant today, okay, sir?
You as well. Thank you for having me.